Aliveness has to do with your vitality. It is this feeling and sensing in your body of when you feel more alive, when you feel more inspired. The other thing is noticing when you're more engaged in something. So you have that. And I think intuition for me, and I think for you too, is more of like a knowing. Welcome to The Way of the Muse, a podcast for women who want to create richness in every area of their lives, from business and career to lifestyle, relationships, family, purpose, and fulfillment. I'm Gigi Sage.
And I'm McKenna Sage. We're a mother-daughter coaching team, and combined, we've spent over 4 decades helping people create their best and most fully expressed lives. If you're ready to step into your bigger dreams with ease, fun, and flow, you're in the right place. Let's get into the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. We are talking today. Gigi and I are here together.
Hello.
And we're talking about aliveness versus intuition. So last week's episode was really about intuition and some stories around intuition. And then we've talked in previous episodes around aliveness. And I've had a personal curiosity for a while about what are the differences. Of course, I've kind of worked with both of these tools over my life, and I have recognized some myself, but Gigi has been doing her work for many, many years and is the expert on aliveness, I would say. And so I wanted to have an open dialogue with you, Gigi, about what you really see, because you're a very intuitive person also.
Yeah.
And yet we also teach this tool of aliveness. So what do you see as some of the fundamental differences between these two, or how are they different?
Well, I think aliveness can be the doorway to intuition. I think it really, in many ways, it comes first. And I can give you a story, an example. Okay, it's going to be a made-up story, right? Imagine, I love music, and, I think I really want to get more connected to music, not just listening to music on my computer, but, listening, really being immersed in music. So I decide I'm going to start going to events and concerts and maybe following some of the artists that I really, really love. And so I start immersing myself in that. I'm doing that. And while I'm in these experiences, I start to notice that, I just, when I hear a piano being played, I'm so touched by it. And truly, I've always had a longing to play the piano. And so in that moment, I say, I have enough experience of being able to follow my aliveness, right? I've been doing a long time, and I feel myself get excited about that. So I have the thought when I get home that I will actually organize to go to a piano store and look at pianos. Why not just check it out and look at, I always love these white grand pianos, so beautiful. So I decided to go. I go to a piano store. I'm there. I'm looking at the pianos, and I happen to meet a man there who is also looking at the same piano. And we bond together talking about music. We have some same interest, and I end up meeting the love of my life there. Right.
Oh, I love this story.
Yeah, that's a great story, right? So you can say almost that aliveness, it leads us also to synchronicities. And I think, our intuition does that in some way as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say aliveness is the doorway to intuition, then in that case, there's sort of a blend of aliveness, intuition going on. So you followed your aliveness to go to the concerts, and there was some sort of intuition there as well. It's kind of, you're saying these two play together a lot of the time.
They do play together, I think. There is a distinction. We can talk a little bit more about that. You and I discussed that, aliveness, again, aliveness has to do with your vitality. It is this feeling and sensing in your body of when you feel more alive, when you feel more inspired. The other thing is noticing when you're more engaged in something. So you have that. And I think intuition for me, and I think for you too, is more of like a knowing.
Mm. Yeah, I guess if some people haven't listened to the previous episode, then do you want to just tell them about kind of at every moment your aliveness is, your energy or your vitality? Yeah.
Yeah. So with aliveness, when we call following your aliveness, it's a simple, You can measure it like this. At every moment, your vitality is either increasing or decreasing. When it's increasing is when you're the most alive. So when you feel those moments of increase in vitality, when you feel those moments again of engagement. So you notice a shift, you feel more inspired. And those are the moments to document and really write down. Those moments allow you, when you take action in the direction of what brings you alive, it starts to help you design a life that's more aligned for you.
So I'm curious with
Excuse
that
me.
though, because with aliveness, something I've heard even from people listening to the podcast who are starting to play with this and going, oh, wow, this is, I feel like I kind of knew this, but it's surprising to really, pay attention throughout my day and maybe even write it down. And something I've heard a lot is that people say, well, I noticed this thing didn't bring me alive, so I just don't think I should be doing that. Or, not everything in my job brings me alive, so am I in the wrong job? Right.
Right.
So, what do you say to somebody about kind of these subtle distinctions of not everything you do is going to bring you alive, right?
Yeah, it's to be very careful. Your aliveness, and when you start to measure that and you start to act on it, is these are really pieces of the puzzle to help you build a strong foundation in life. It'd be nice if we could just do everything that brought us alive, but I don't think I haven't seen anybody do that yet. And so we use this as something that it helps us gain more energy. Like I said, if I'm going to concerts and I am enjoying myself, my life starts to feel different, and I start to see differently because I'm doing something that really, it fills my battery. It makes me feel happier. It makes me feel stronger. We talked about, I always say I love to dance, right? If I go out dancing, if I was dancing last night and having a good time, and then again being in music, today I probably would have been a lot brighter, a lot clearer, and you just had that experience recently, right?
Yeah, I went to an event in Austin when we were visiting, and there's all these women, like 120 women, and it was kind of dialogue, personal growth, but it also involved a lot of dancing. And I came home, and then when I woke up the next morning, I recorded an audio for one of our programs. And as I was recording that audio, I remember thinking, oh, I might have to do multiple takes. I hadn't really prepped a lot for it. And I was just so in flow. It just streamed out of me. I was so in this rhythm and this flow. And I was like, wow, how did that happen? Right. My voice was really, really low because I had been yelling and dancing the night
Yeah.
before. And I thought, oh, it's because I was doing things that bring me alive. And so that taps
Yeah.
us into a lot of times, like you're saying, more energy and also more flow.
Yeah. More flow.
Yeah.
And so, going and then making, like you said, the thing of you're making your job wrong. I've had so many clients, they start to do things that bring them alive, and they're in a job and they think, I really want to leave this career. And they start adding other aspects to their life, doing things outside of work that they really enjoy, things that are very much in alignment with them. And then they start going to work, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, my work is not that bad. And so they change. And through that change, then the environment changes, or what they're doing and the way they feel about it changes.
Yeah, I love that story. And I know that when you were really supporting me around making my transition 6 years ago, do you want to share what you told me? Because I was in that place of, I'm so done with this
Right.
business. I'm so ready to make a change. And I was just, yeah, frustrated with my previous business. And what did you tell me at that time?
Well, I told you you had to get grateful for the business that you had and for all the opportunities it gave you. You had an amazing career there, amazing business there that you had grown, and you were starting to make it like, oh, I don't like this. I want to get away from it. And we know what that's like, when you want to try to get away from something, someone, right? They want to be, it would stick to you more, even more. So it's changing how you were with it, and really going, wow, what an opportunity I've had here to work from home, to be able to travel while I work, So to really love, love, love up the business that you had, because that's the only way you were going to finally be let go from it. And you did that, right? You really made the change there.
Yeah, it was powerful. I really, you were mentoring me and I said, okay, whatever you say, I'm going to do it. So I really shifted my attitude and I focused, like you said, on what am I really grateful for about this? I had great clients. I had the privilege of, working with some incredible people. And I, like you said, I had flexibility. I made good money. There were a lot of things to love about it, even though I was pretty stressed a lot of the time. And when I really put my focus there, and I just said, well, also the skills I learned at that time were just powerful in terms of
Right.
writing and online marketing and skills I use to this day. And so I really shifted my focus. I got, excuse me, a lot more grateful. And in that, it really did feel like a shift happened. And relatively quickly, along with the other actions I was taking, I was able to make that transition where it had been really hard in the past. So
Right.
something
You had been
about
trying to
that.
do that. Remember, you had been trying to do that for a couple years, I think, even. Yeah. Yeah. So,
So there's something in that, not sort of putting things in boxes, maybe of, okay, because this doesn't bring me alive, it's bad or wrong, or it's not something I should be doing. It's more so that when people you're saying do more of what bring them alive, then they have more energy to do the other things in their life um, and their perspective changes, like we talk about a lot. And, we haven't really gone into what do people do with the things that drain their energy. And I think in a future episode at some point we can dive deeper into that. So right now it's for people probably to just pay attention, right?
mhm. Pay attention and start taking action. Oh, you mean about draining energy? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the things
Yeah,
that
just
drain
start
their
to notice.
energy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good distinction to begin to make. And then, as you said, we can talk more about that and share with people how to navigate the draining energy part.
Yeah, so beautiful. So we've talked a little bit about this distinction between aliveness and intuition, more so less of a distinction and more so that aliveness can often lead to intuition. And it can also lead to more synchronicity. And I do want to share one story about that, which, as we were kind of prepping for this episode and I was thinking about it, when you said aliveness is the doorway to your intuition, I thought back and I was like, was that true for me? Because
Mhm.
that first story that I told in our last episode was about when I was early on in California and I went to this retreat and it opened up all these incredible things in my life. And I thought, well, if I track back a little bit before that, I was in university about to graduate in my senior year. I went on that one corporate job interview where I sat under the fluorescent lights and I said, I just don't think this is for me. And so as I went back to my dorm room and I'm going, what am I going to do? I just went through this 4-year degree and thought I was going to go into the corporate world. What do I really want here? Your words floated into my mind. And I just thought, what do I really want? And what would I enjoy? And I remembered when we were young that we traveled a lot. And I thought, I really enjoyed that. I really liked being able to travel. It was why I studied international business in the first place. And so I thought, well, how cool would it be? How cool would it be? I, had been working with some clients doing copywriting a little bit and some marketing work online while I was in university. I'd helped you with that early on and some of your former clients. I thought maybe I could work online. Maybe I could, this was 2012. There weren't a lot of people working virtually at that time, but I thought that would be really cool if I could work from my laptop. And so through that, which was really kind of following my aliveness, right? Something I wanted, which was to travel, you suggested that I reach out to one of those clients who was actually a former client of yours, a former coaching client that I had done some work for. And we ended up talking, and she actually agreed to hire me to come in and do some marketing work for her, that I could be fully virtual. But she was based in Southern California. So that is how I originally came out to Southern California, was to do training with her. And that led to all the other synchronicities that became, me moving to California and then all the other stories I shared. So I thought that was really cool because I hadn't had that realization prior to
Mhm.
us talking about this, that yeah, aliveness it was the doorway in that. case to me beginning to follow more and more of my intuition.
Yeah, because you had learned that and been doing it for many, many years. So again, you didn't probably consciously think about that, but you had already learned how to pay attention to when
Yeah,
you the most of life. Yeah.
I'd very much gone away from it, but there were little seeds
Pieces.
that you
Yeah.
had planted that were still in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this piece of, so if aliveness is the doorway to your intuition, I feel like a lot of times, like you're saying, people have a sense of intuition underneath. They might even have a sense of their aliveness underneath, but they've never put language to it before. Where when they start to really chart their aliveness and write down the things that bring them alive, or when they start to um, pay attention to their intuition, they go, oh, it's kind of always been there. It was just below the surface. So it's sort of like this unconscious tool or this unconscious awareness that people actually already have. And so, with that, I'm just curious. You always say this thing of awareness. Tell us about awareness and making
Yeah.
the unconscious conscious.
Well, I always say awareness starts to create the change. So when you become aware of something, you've learned something basically, and this is in our work is very reflective as we go through and share a lot of what we do. We'll have times in the podcast where we'll share different ways of looking at yourself and seeing and making things that are unconscious, and you might have a sense about it, but you've never really looked at it. And we're going to give you a lot of different tools how to see that, because the moment I become aware, just like I said, like if I make the distinction that when I go out dancing and I'm listening to music, and the next morning I wake up and I feel so much more vital, then if I'm aware of that, if I connect those two things, then all of a sudden I'm going to know something very powerful, because then I know, wow, I should be spending more time dancing, whatever that is. And so the awareness, when we start to become aware of what brings us alive, then that starts to create a change in us. And that also becomes a knowing that we can take, and we'll remember this. Also, because aliveness, think about it, when you follow your aliveness, it's a very embodied thing, because again, you feel your vitality. So you've learned something not just in your head, but something actually in your whole energy system.
I love that. And I think that so it's true on the positive side, like we're talking about right now, which is maybe you've been going through, or I often am going through my day-to-day life. I'm busy, I'm, you know, doing a lot of different things, and I can be a little unconscious at times.
Mhm.
And so often in that, then when people have these tools and they're listening to a podcast like this, it's like, don't just listen to this podcast, take what we're sharing here. And we always say, just try it on, right? So as you go out and you start to pay attention, it does start to make a change. If you start to pay attention, oh, where is my energy higher, right? Or where do I start to feel that sense of knowing? The other side of this awareness starts to create the change, though, is sometimes it's more challenging aspects of ourselves, right? Or
Right.
patterns.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. I think we talked about it already in another one in the podcast, is we have certain like unconscious patterns and ways that we um, are in the world, or ways we are with people. And we're aware, but we're not really aware. And I think one of the biggest things is we're not aware of our impact. So when we give you some tools to start to become aware, sometimes that's a little embarrassing, it's difficult, but when you see it, it will start to change. So I always say, you don't need to go work on it. You don't need to process yourself. The unraveling will begin, because once you're aware of it, and, say when you talk to people or a certain person, you act a certain way with them and you notice their lights go out. And so the next time you do that, you're going to probably be aware. And you might still do it, but then the next time you might stop in the middle of doing it. The next time you might notice it right before you're doing it. So that awareness of it starts to make it change. It makes it unravel.
I want to revisit this piece around aliveness and intuition because you said earlier, aliveness is the doorway to your intuition. And I really see how that can be true. And then you also said they have a different kind of sensation almost like, aliveness is the sense of vitality increasing, and intuition is this kind of knowing.
Mhm.
So how do you access your intuition? We were talking about this, right? Like we have different ways that we access our intuitions, you and I. What are some of the ways that you tap into it?
For me, it's funny when I'm walking. When I'm walking, something about the movement and everything, I'll have moments of like knowing something, seeing something. Also, when I'm daydreaming, when I sit and I just kind of let myself relax into kind of an expansion, right? Looking out the window or daydreaming or, and then sometimes it's in my sleep. It comes a lot. I work with people in my sleep, and then I have moments of seeing things. I'll wake up and I'll see something like this very, clear moment of something we need to do or an intuition about something.
It's
How about
interesting because you
you?
say, well, I'll share mine in just a moment, but
Yeah,
it's interesting because you say while you're walking and while you're daydreaming, and the immediate thought that I have is most people while they're walking, they're on their phones. And most people, when they're sitting around, they're probably on their
on
phones
your
or their
phone. Yeah,
computers or they're doing something. And I think it's maybe a little bit of a lost art for my generation
right.
and an interesting thing to think about that if you're not feeling like you're very tapped into your intuition, like maybe you're not having these open spaces like you're creating there. Because when you're walking, you must not be only on your phone if you're going to have these kind of moments of clarity come through. And sitting around and daydreaming is not something that I do very often. So just to kind of, yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I think our age difference makes a huge difference, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I have no interest in being on my phone all the time, right? For me, I mean, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
can keep looking at it, but for me, it's much more powerful when I walk and I feel and I sense and that I take in the colors and the plants, and that's something I do. That's something you and I have done together since you were what, young, is walk together and talk together and everything.
Yeah, Gigi's had to teach me how to observe the world around me because
Yeah.
I'm someone who much more is in my I don't know how you would say it, definitely at times in my head, but less so now than I used to be. Definitely, I'm trying to think what the difference is. I'm very much focused on what's going on right in front of me or right in my,
Mhm.
conversation I'm having, let's say. Whereas we go for walks and you're like, look at that beautiful plant over there and look at these, trees and look at those people. And we
Mm.
talk and observe while we're talking. But I think there's actually something to that. There's like I've often thought there's an art somehow to that so
Yeah.
I practice it almost as a practice to start expanding my awareness sometimes when I walk as I go, oh, look at that over there. I channel my inner Gigi. But it's interesting for people to think about that are listening is like, do you have those open spaces? And you
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was just going to say we had a woman remember in our class a couple of days ago. That's what she said is that when she does have space, what she notices is even if she goes and she lays out at the pool, all of a sudden she's on her phone when she has some space and she even hires a babysitter and she goes and does things. She ends up on her phone or doing something that she never allows herself just time to be reflective and maybe journal and think about herself.
Yeah, and you asked if how I access intuition. So for me, journaling is definitely one way. I'm trying to think how else. I think for me, it has to do with really being relaxed. If I'm busy, going, kind of in that go mode, then it's often I don't have access. I feel like I'm disconnected a little bit more. It's about really carving out, like you're saying, time and space, sometimes to just sit and not exactly meditate, but sort of meditate, just get really quiet. And maybe I bring a certain question to mind or something like that. And I really sit with that question until I can get underneath my thoughts and my emotions about it and go to, is there a deeper knowing here? That's one of the ways that sometimes I'll access intuition. And like I said, it's not always there, but sometimes I do get to a different kind of feeling, a different kind of knowing. So I do feel like what your ways and my ways have in common is they're less in the go mode and more in the flow mode, right?
Yeah.
They're
Right
less in
about
the
that.
doing and more in the being, maybe.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's very accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's interesting to think about. Whereas aliveness, I think, is a little bit of an easier tool to start to practice with in your day to day. And you can practice whichever one calls to you most, or use both. But like we said, aliveness can be that doorway to accessing more of your intuition as your perspective changes. And so that is a great tool because I think it's just so accessible. Everybody can tune in to where do I feel more alive and
Yeah.
more vitality, and where do I feel more drained.
Yeah.
So that might be a space to begin. Or you might listen to this and go, I want to carve out more open spaces. And how do I do that and start to play with intuition as well?
Yeah, and what we're sharing is, really what works for us and what we've seen. I think there's a lot of other practices around intuition. So again, but I do believe, like you said, that aliveness or following your aliveness, following that vitality is such a simple, simple way to start to understand yourself better and begin to navigate you and what you want to do and start to bring you more into really the life that you want. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank
Mhm.
you all for being here. Thank you, Gigi, for sharing and just dialoguing with me on these topics that I'm so fascinated by and I love so much. So very excited to be able to share, like you said, our perspectives and our experience with others. So we hope it serves you. Please let us know what you're loving about the podcast. You can always write into us at support@wayofthemuse.com. You can also tell us if there's certain questions or topics you have. And we're actually about to start recording our first on-air coaching sessions. So we talked
Right
about
about
this.
that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is basically where you can apply to actually be coached on air. And we've had a lot of applications come in, and we're doing our first few interviews, or not interviews so much as coaching sessions soon. So it's like a real live coaching session, but we will actually put it out as a podcast episode so that everybody can learn from it. So if that's something you're curious about, you can go to wayofthemuse.com/on air. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
That's our episode for today, but let's not make it the end of our love story. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and think of some women in your life you'd love to share it with. And if you want to learn more about our events and programs, visit wayofthemuse.com. See you next time.